I think if you're going to be a film critic, or you're going to be a film fan, then seeing bad movies is every bit as valuable as seeing good movies. I've got no respect for film criticism which has a sort of quality control beforehand. I don't want to see that, it'll be bad. I want to go and see this, it'll be good. I've just got no interest in that. That to me is dilettantism, and I don't care. I'm only interested in it if you're willing to see everything, or to see as much as you possibly can. The best thing, when I started out working, I was working for City Life in Manchester. You took what you had going, so you filled the gaps. And I came down to Time Out. You'd review whatever they sent you to review. And the Monthly Film Bulletin, the MFB, when I first started working for that in London, they had this fabulous policy, which is the way they trained writers, was they sent you to see terrible films because they didn't want to let you loose on anything that was valuable. I remember Kim Newman saying to me the best training he ever had was the MFB sent him to review cut down softcore porn films showing in the West End, films that didn't make any sense in their full version but made even less sense in their cut version, and then you'd have to write a coherent review of the film. And he said, if you've done that and you've written a coherent review of a film like that, you can do anything. And I think he's right. Yeah.
Can I get your opinions on a couple of things? Because I actually tweeted that I was interviewing you, and I got about the most questions I've ever got from anyone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's pretty good. Somebody was reading that you avoid TV, that you wouldn't be the biggest fan of TV. How do you feel about the movement that all these kind of actors and actresses have made returns to TV, like Kate Winslet for Mildred Pierce and stuff like that?
Well, look, I used to have a patently silly opinion that film was better than television, and then I was put right by Harry Shearer, who said to me, well, that's just insane. You saying that Die Hard 4.0 is better than The Simpsons, which I understand it. It was
a good point.
Actually, and I wrote a piece for The Observer a while ago. They sort of sent me off with a bunch of box sets of television movies and said, watch them. And I conceded I was wrong. And believe me, it pains me to say that. But the problem is I don't have time. I mean, I'm trying, at the moment there's 12 films coming out a week. So I'm just, whenever I'm at home and I've got any time with the television, I'll watch a movie. And it's not because I think that movies are better than television. I'm trying as much as possible to keep up with everything that's coming out in the cinema. But I think Mark Lawson will say the same thing. I've had this conversation with him, which said there are much more interesting things happening in television. I know people who think there are much more interesting things happening in computer games. That's fine. I've got nothing against them. I just don't have time.
Yeah. We were talking a lot on the show the last few weeks about superhero films, especially over the summer. Do you think it's getting to the point now where it's really fatigued and we've basically had enough? I mean, the amount of films that are coming out next year that are superhero films as well.
Well, I think that, superhero films have always been with us. You look back to the serials of the 30s and 40s and Flash Gordon, and, they're a constant. I think that at the moment we're very aware that there's been all the Marvel adaptations and the DC adaptations, but each one of those movies stands or falls on their own virtues. Chris Nolan at the moment is making Dark Knight Rises. I can't tell you that any part of me is in any way depressed that he's doing that. I mean,
exactly.
The movie is as good as the movie is. The funny thing about superhero movies is that generically they don't really exist. I mean, there is no comparison between, something like Batman Begins, which I think is a wonderful film, and, for example, the first Fantastic Four movie. I mean, they're both superhero movies, but they have no connecting thread whatsoever. So it doesn't bother me. The only thing that does bother me is that Hollywood runs an awful lot on franchises. I mean, it always has done. Audience awareness of a character or a comic strip is something that builds in a certain degree of financial stability. And sometimes you think that franchises exist just because of the saleability of the franchise. But I don't have a problem with superhero movies. I mean, actually, whether or not we count Batman as a superhero, because obviously he can't fly or, bend steel with his bare hands. But I'm really excited to see what Chris Nolan does with the new Batman film. Well, there was a period, I think in the late 90s, early noughties, when we had a rash of really boring American horror films, and it did seem like all the things that we all got fed up about in the 70s. In the 70s, there was a lot of movies about, blokes with knives chasing around women in their underwear. And then Clive Barker came along and he said, look, we've all enough already, okay? Can we have something different, Hellraiser? And then that was great. There was the great new wave of British horror with writers like Ramsey Campbell. And then Scream happened, which was a sort of postmodern take on those old 1970s slasher movies. But then very quickly, I Know What You Did Last Summer happened, and it was like we were back where we started. Yeah. And there was certainly a period at the end of the 90s and and noughties thinking I'm just not interested in American horror. But then there was the great wave of Japanese horror with Ringu and Dark Water. Then there was the South Korean. These movies have been around. It was just they started being imported. Then we saw strange stuff coming from Belgium. I mean, recently we had the Swedish movie Let the Right One In, which I thought was absolutely wonderful. And there's a question about whether or not that's even a horror movie. I mean, it's clearly a genre movie. At any one time, there's always interesting stuff happening in the horror genre. It just may not be apparent because of the sort of stuff that gets distributed. You know, Alan Jones is a very good friend of mine who runs Fright Fest. You know, says every year there's stuff that shocks and amazes them, and sometimes it's horrible stuff that I've got no interest in, and sometimes it's brilliant stuff. But there is always interesting horror out there. It just may not be the stuff that you see in the multiplexes.
Yeah. Someone else actually asked me to ask you about Irish productions as well. And have you seen anything recently that's Irish that you really took notice of?
Well, you know, I mean, I think with any of those questions, if you really take notice of something, it's not because of where it comes from. You know, I mean, the Martin McDonagh, movies like. Martin McDonagh's brother made a film recently.
Oh, there's The Garden in Bruges.
The Garden, no, in Bruges was fabulous. The Guard I didn't see because I was off the week that The Guard came out, and I was very interested to know whether or not The Guard had any of the of the sort of spark of In Bruges. I thought In Bruges was incendiary. I mean, I remember sitting in the cinema watching In Bruges and thinking, "Blimey, Charlie!" I just thought that was really, really something. I mean, I thought it was a terrific piece of work. I just did a film festival in Dorset in which we showed Once, which I just, I love that film. I think it's a really beautiful little movie.